Welcome to a Modern Nonprofit podcast, powered by the Charity CFO, your compass for creative solutions in running your nonprofit. I'm Tasha Anderson, your host and guide through this nonprofit maze. From fundraising to volunteer management, we've got your back. Join us each episode for fresh, game-changing strategies that can make a real impact. Nonprofit friends, welcome back to another episode of a Modern Nonprofit podcast. I'm your host, Tasha Anderson, and I'm here with my new friend, Paul Morris. Paul, first of all, thank you for joining us and having this conversation. Paul and I had a whole other conversation before we hit record, and we said maybe that'll be another episode. But Paul, you, like me, found yourself working in the nonprofit industry, but maybe in a slightly different way. Your current role is the Executive Fundraising Coach at a technology platform called Auxilia, which I'm excited to talk more about technology and using technology in the nonprofit space. This is a growing trend. I see so many statistics that nonprofits are at least now much more open than they ever have been about leveraging technology to combat rising costs, inflation, and just kind of the desire to modernize. But before we dive into the conversation, Paul, thanks for coming on, joining us, and sharing some knowledge you have on how maybe we can start doing that.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Tasha. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation. So I've worked in the nonprofit fundraising field for more than 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell into it when I was 19, discovered that it was exactly what I needed and wanted to be doing with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really been in the last couple of years that really is through, especially through my work with Auxilia, that I've started to think more and more about technology, nonprofits, how they intersect, and how too often it seems technology becomes a barrier for
Mm-hmm.
nonprofits to have the kind of success that they desire, even though they just like you've said, they want to use technology effectively. They can see its value and impact. But it becomes this weird, it's like even though even though they have this desire to
Mm-hmm.
use it effectively and efficiently to propel their missions forward, it's like there's this barrier that they can't get over, this resistance to making investments
Mm-hmm.
in technology, not even big investments. I mean,
Right.
for God's sake, when I started my career, the organization I went to work for was using Mac SEs,
Mm-hmm.
right? With a screen that was maybe 6 inches diagonal,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was black and
Mm-hmm.
white. And we had a grant and we're like, oh my God, we need to spend this grant down or else we
Mm-hmm.
won't get the same level of funding next year. And that was the trigger to invest in like actual desktop computers with
Mm-hmm.
reasonably sized monitors, you
Yeah.
know. And had we not been able to do that, the organization still would have run. I don't know how long they would have run on
Right.
these little Mac SEs. It was
Right.
crazy.
I've seen this so much in my career. I mean, I've been working with nonprofits now for over 15 years. And I was sharing with you earlier that I know this barrier for investing in technology firsthand. I mean, this was a huge problem back when I worked for a nonprofit organization. I would find even insignificant investment in technology would automate or streamline a lot of the manual tasks that I was doing and spending my time doing. Pretty significantly. And maybe we're talking like $150 a month here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize, I'm the numbers person. So anybody's coming at me and saying, but Tasha, every dollar counts. Believe me, I know, because I make all the budgets. I see it. But what is the opportunity cost of me spending, hours and hours and hours of my time doing something that's manual, when that can be automated? And I would even argue it's not even just, oh, well, what else would you do with your time if you have capacity, whatever. There is a huge component of people just don't want to do monotonous, boring tasks that they could automate. So that fuels burnout in a position. And I'm talking about when I was there, okay, I've had this firm now for 8 years. So this was 8+ years ago that I'm talking about this. But listen, I just had an organization I was working with that has a very large platform. They use ADP payroll. A lot of people know about this system. They use that for payroll, and they have two full-time people spend at least 2 days twice a month to take that payroll information and manipulate it in a way to get it into their accounting function to make it drilled down by the appropriate department and the appropriate grants. Okay, it's two people, 2 hours, twice a month, something
Right.
that for less than $100 can be done completely automated. And the
Yeah.
organization will not do it. There's just something psychological about these two people that are spending 2 hours twice a month. Like, our time is
Yeah.
not as valuable enough for like $100 a month or something like this. So this is still happening
Oh,
all of the time. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it's this weird, I don't know why, but it seems like there's this fear of making an investment in technology. And um, I think that there are two reasons. At least this is what I'm seeing.
Mhm.
I think there are really kind of two core reasons. One, and you've touched on some of it. One is that I think that organizations or organizational leadership are afraid of making investments in something intangible, something that evolves technology,
Mhm.
because they're afraid of the critique of funders, right?
Mhm.
Funders saying, or their boards saying,
Mhm.
well, why are you making this investment when you could be investing in programs, right? Or donors saying,
Mhm.
well, how come you're making an investment here when it should all be going into, or a majority of it should be going into
Mhm.
programming. I mean, and don't even get me started on this whole like BS thing about overhead, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that, how much
Right.
time do you have?
Right.
Because like we can really get into that. So they're afraid, and funders lack this understanding, seem to lack an understanding of how wise investments or smart
Mhm.
investments, even in small technological advances, actually help propel the mission forward more efficiently, more effectively. It allows program staff to report on impact more readily, or
Mhm.
development staff to accurately report to a donor the impact of the charitable investment they have made, or
Mhm.
engage donors, right, to do that
Mhm.
stewardship, because right, the whole right, everyone is clutching their pearls around retention and how awful retention is.
Right.
I think that some of that can be laid at a lack of useful technology, where you have to kind of guess, or you'd be better off using 3x5 cards to track
Mhm.
donations accurately, so that you can go back to that person and say, this is what we were able to accomplish thanks to you.
Mhm.
How can we continue to work together? Right. So there's that first thing, like people are just freaked out about making an investment in something that, you can't really see,
Right.
because they're afraid of being criticized over making
Mhm.
that investment. And then
Mhm.
secondly, and so then that sets up this idea, then on top of that, a lot of nonprofits are under resourced,
Yeah.
right? Big, small, doesn't matter the cause area, they are chronically under resourced. So
Right.
there's always, and I'm sure you have seen this in your
Yes.
work, there's always something else. There's always a different priority, or, this program thing, or this, report, or
Mhm.
there's always something else. And, the money just then isn't left over
Right.
to make an investment in technology. And N10, the organization N10,
Mhm.
which is a really phenomenal technology focused organization, just published a report last month, April, so just a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
about how nonprofits are investing in technology. And it's coming out of their general operating budgets. They're not,
Mhm.
funders are not making
Paying for.
it, technology investment grants. So
Mhm.
when you have uh, this landscape where funders, are like super suspicious, and nonprofits are woefully under-resourced, and they have to make hard decisions. I mean, technology gets the short end
Mm-hmm.
of it, and they're going to they'll go as long as they can with a system that doesn't frankly does not serve them, and
Yeah.
it hasn't served them for a while.
Right.
But they just either they won't because they're afraid, or they simply can't
Yeah.
because they don't have those resources, and they won't pursue them because a lot of funders are like, hard pass, no thanks. We want to fund, you know very tangible programmatic things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think too, in my experience, I remember the feeling, it goes back to under-resourced, but in a slightly different angle from like a human capacity perspective. I think what I see a lot of times, and this kind of speaks to the work that we do, like leaders of organizations, and I don't just mean like the CEOs or the executive directors. I'm talking about the development directors or the finance directors or whatever. It's like they know that they need to make improvements in technology, but they're overwhelmed by the choices. Like, this
Mm-hmm,
is a huge investment. So how do we know the right one?
mm-hmm.
And they're overwhelmed with the idea of creating capacity to implement, because as I always tell people, it's not just the implementation, but it's the troubleshooting that needs to go into
Mm-hmm.
it. And so if you're already running around like a chicken with its head cut off, completely overwhelmed in your day-to-day life, the daunting task of implementing a new platform that's going to radically change how you do things is very overwhelming. So I think we fall
Mm-hmm.
back into, well, at least what we know, or at least what we have, we already know. We can keep, we'll do this someday. We know it's a priority. We just don't have time to do it. And then you blink a few more
Right.
times, and then it's 3 years later. And I see this a lot of times with accounting solutions. I mean, all the time. And that's why, our firm tries to make it as easy as possible for implement, like pretty hands off for the clients, like just give us the keys, to the kingdom and we'll make it happen for
Right.
you. But I remember in my time working at the nonprofit, I would get payroll companies that would call me all the time, like, hey, whatever. So even if you could save me a little bit of money, the idea of changing this platform to another is, I emotionally cannot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's even daunting enough to change your bank or
Right.
something. So the idea of changing a donor CRM system, even though they know that they're overpaying for a platform, or it's way more features than what they need, or it's lacking features they do need, or more often not that I see, there usually a lot of software solutions might do what you need it to do, but nobody knows how to use the dang thing because the person that implemented it 10 years ago is long
Right.
gone, and no one has any
Right.
institutional knowledge. Oh, and by the way, that platform is not supported anymore. I see that happen a lot of times. It's like, we can't even find someone to help us figure out how to use the functions of this thing. So I
Yeah.
think that's a
Yeah.
big part of it too, is just the anxiety around the project management and implementation. And that's where I think it has to go on a strategic plan. We have to create space for it. We have to commit to continuously evaluating our technology and continuing to make those investments, and try to overcome the financial hurdles for the financial investment you speak of, but also the timing and staff capacity hurdles to fully implement. So that's
Right,
my
you're
take.
absolutely right. And I mean, I have been pitched by, so in my career, I have been pitched probably by every single fundraising platform in the marketplace, and some that are no longer in existence, right? And they're
Mhm.
all like, oh, we're going to make things so much easier, faster, more efficient, shinier,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And it becomes overwhelming for sure.
Hmm.
When you couple that with, just like you said, um, a lack of staff capacity, of understanding, it becomes incredibly difficult
Hmm.
to be willing to make that change, because if something goes wrong or the implementation takes longer,
Hmm.
right? And then what do you do once you have implemented this new system? Are you willing to set time aside to do the kind of training and continued,
Right.
right? the continued work to make it really effective. And sadly, most nonprofits are not doing that. They're not,
Mhm.
they get sold on some kind of a system.
Mhm.
And my experience, my most direct experience is with like donor related systems, right? They
Sure.
get sold on some kind of a system, and then they find themselves locked into a 3 or 5 year
Yeah.
contract.
Mhm.
Um, and they have, and what they end up getting isn't what they actually need. And I think this kind of goes back to this fear that I talked about earlier. It's a fear of asking questions, right? Or pushing
Mhm.
back on a salesperson, um, and saying, well, this is what, right? This is what we need. Can your
Mhm.
system do this?
Right.
Right. And not just, accepting the jazz hands answer.
Mhm.
Um, Really getting in, setting aside the time to evaluate, well, just like you said, put it in your strategic plan. That is such a smart idea, because then
Mhm.
that gives you the time and space to do the kind of thinking and setting up
Research. Yeah.
the research. Well, it's not even the research, it's the what are our evaluation criteria
Right.
to to identify a system that will allow us to continue to scale on the path that we are on, right? Or get us
Mhm.
someplace fast, whatever.
Right.
Um, Organizations aren't giving themselves that time.
Right.
And then, they every, who knows who it falls to administer the whole thing,
Mhm.
right? And who has time, right? Who has time for that? Right? Because the organization has not set aside, right, because it isn't always in their strategic plan or in their just like day-to-day thinking. They haven't set aside the time or the capacity to really ensure that once they have a system that is really, it serves everyone within that organization, no matter what role they're playing.
Mhm.
That system allows the organization to move forward. And then, it's like, well, this is what we chose. So this is what we've
Right.
got, right? This is what we've got to do for God knows how long. Because, like, like you said, the emotional investment in switching a system, it's like
Yes.
sometimes it's just too much.
Oh,
Sometimes it is
oh my
just
gosh. Yes.
too much.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit more because I like to joke. I think I was so deprived of technology and modern resources working in the nonprofit industry that I've
Mhm.
very well overcompensated now running my company. I think very, very intentionally about all of the technology that we use, from the machines that we use to, the software solutions that we choose. And we're always evaluating new or are we always using the best? And I'm not just talking about the software we use for our clients because we're always reevaluating that too, but we have a lot of internal, right, technology
Mhm.
we use for kind of our
Mhm.
day-to-day operations. And I get pitched all the time for software. And I would say this concept of SaaS, software as a service. So think about, I would argue, like payroll systems and things like that, HR systems and things like that. Those they kind of pitch as a service, but they're really a software kind of running behind the scenes and doing most of the work, right? So I get pitched all the time, and there are times that we have a need. And I'll tell you kind of my approach for evaluating is first and foremost identifying what we specifically need, like what is the gap? What do we not currently have?
Mhm.
And as I'm going through that, I'm exhausting the possibility of any of our current software providers offering that solution is either an add-on, another module, et cetera. Because one thing I do not want to do, and I see this all the time with nonprofits. I was on a conversation yesterday with a nonprofit that had like 6 different payment processors and they had no real rhyme or reason why they did. So anyway, I'm very intentional not add on something else into our tech stack that I can get that app or, specific service offered through something else, right?
Mhm.
So I'm really clear about what is it that we actually need. And then I start looking for providers that fill that need and maybe any potential needs. Like, so short term, this is what I need. Long term, this is what I can kind of anticipate us needing, or the direction that we're wanting to head. So I look into those features, but also I'm looking at, does this integrate with other platforms that I think it needs to integrate? I'm talking about my accounting solution. I'm talking about, I have a CRM system, like we use Salesforce. Like, does it integrate with Salesforce? Like, does it integrate with, our Google Cloud or whatever, right? So I'm always looking at, like, how do I want this to work smarter and not harder? Then I do very comprehensive demos with these folks, all of the questions, right? Asking them all of the hard questions. I hear a lot of times people say, well, the software says they could do it, but I can't really do it in practice. If you're seeing that feedback or reviews as you're researching, ask those questions and have them show you how it's going to be done. Because I've been told things can be done, and whenever I have them dig into it and they have to go back to the developer team, like, well, it's actually in the works. I'm like, all right, well, you call me when it's done. Okay. And then ultimately I get end users in on the conversations too, to make sure they understand the platform that we're looking at, until ultimately we decide on something. But I also obviously evaluate cost and those contracts, Paul, like you were saying, like 4 or 5 year contracts. It's like, I personally push back on anything that even requires an annual contract. It's like, look, certain things I'm forced, but for the most part, even if I'm paying extra money month to month, I want to make sure that this software, and we're talking about large CRMs that are huge investments. Obviously, you're going to, go all in with those, but I'm talking those small little things that we were kind of mentioning a little bit earlier. Pay the extra money month to month until you feel like this is going to stick. And then you can sign up for the annual discounts and things like that. So there is definitely a lot more homework, like you said, that a team could be doing to really do the due diligence needed, and land on hopefully a platform that will make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything you say, no matter the size or type of the organization that you're in, that's exactly how you should be evaluating what goes into, your tech stack. I can't even believe I'm saying tech stack now, and really understanding what it means. Um, like, what are the gaps? Or, when you say, what are the gaps? Can you do something with a current provider rather than start a relationship over with a new provider? That's great, because that should be more efficient. And I would ask for a discount, right? If I'm adding a service with a current provider, I'm going to ask them to maybe discount that add-on, because I've been a loyal customer, and because we all know there's 5 other vendors that would be happy to take my money, would be happy to take my money. Um, and it has to fill that gap. It can't just be shiny just
Right.
because, right?
Tempting.
Well, I mean, I call it magpie syndrome. It's like someone, some nonprofit is doing something super cool with insert, X technology here, and then everyone feels like they're going to miss out if they don't do that. But is that really the right technology for that organization at the time?
Right.
Maybe, but most often it's not,
Yeah.
right? It's just not. But everyone gets like, oh my God, if we're going to miss out on, Mackenzie Scott isn't going to pay attention to us if we aren't doing X. It's like, I hate to break it to you, Mackenzie Scott is not going to pay attention to you no matter
Right.
what you're doing.
Right. It's not going to be your technology.
Right. Exactly. Um, the idea of integration I think, is really critical for small organizations. I mean, this is why I joined the team at Auxilia, because it is an all-in-one platform and really built for those small to maybe early mid-sized organizations, don't have a lot of people on staff, maybe not have a lot of capacity. It's all integrated in one spot. So, you don't have to go have 6 subscriptions, right, to 6 different vendors. It's all in one place, and it's all internally integrated. So if I'm sending out a communication via email, I can see which donors are opening that, engaging with it, which allows me to then tailor my strategy around conversations or further communication with them. Absolutely. And then demos, I love a good demo. And I'm so mean. on a
Mhm.
demo. Like I am like real,
You're
I am
tough.
really mean, but it's because I've been pitched so many times on so many
Right.
systems and heard so many crazy claims
Hmm.
that you have to be like that. The other thing that I really like to do is I like to have time just internally. You talked about this with, working with the end users and getting
Hmm.
their feedback. I like to, I am a sucker for like a 30-day trial,
Mm-hmm. Play around
away
with it.
from
Hmm.
away from a salesperson, away from that pressure, like really play with it,
Hmm.
spend a couple hours a week, before, after work, over lunch, whatever, just playing with the system. Is it the kind of system that you can see yourself using
Hmm.
day in and day out? Is it the kind of system that others can see themselves using?
Right.
You know,
Right.
um, sure, that kind of trial, it's probably not going to be fully featured. Fine. It's going to give me enough to really understand, does this fit into our plans?
Hmm. Which,
And
by the
then,
way, I'll add, you mentioned something about fully featured. A lot of times you can push back and negotiate with software platforms to grant you a greater access to it. We've
mhm,
done that because we wanted to make sure it was going to integrate. And they're like, well, it's not part of our trial. Well, we're not going to buy it unless you prove to us, because this was another one of those integrate with Salesforce, right? And it's
right,
like, if we can't make this work, and once we got full access, come to find out it wasn't going to work. So obviously we said no, but otherwise we would have been locked into this deal, and
right.
come to find out it didn't work. And I don't believe people were misleading me. I just think, we were asking for a very unique thing.
Mhm,
And I like your idea of Auxilia because I've actually done a demo of this platform before. And, we've talked about software solutions, but I will say the biggest culprit for having all of the software is the development department. Okay.
mhm,
And that's where I think Auxilia is designed and where I think it's cool, but to do a demo and think about it from an end user perspective, not just the development associate, setting things up and entering the information, but also what does it look like for your donors and things like that. Because this platform has like the donor CRM platform. It has what I think is really cool social media
mhm,
automation and kind of scheduling all that out, events and ticket management, the payroll processing systems that we talk about. I was just on a call with a client yesterday. Well, we have our online donation platform, and that's a different system. We have donor box, that's our monthly recurring platform, that's a different platform solution. Oh, by the way, we have give smart, so we use that for our special event stuff. And then we also have Bloomerang because that's our
right,
CRM system, and the list goes on and on and on. Oh, and then
right.
also Square, because if somebody called us and wanted to make a donation over the phone, we have to have like that platform. And it's just nuts
It is.
how many of these
Yes.
little things. And then I think that's another web on the other end of the spectrum that any business, for profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter. You start stacking up all of this software and then you kind of zoom out. And sometimes you can see where some of the platforms have, as new product releases become available, you're probably paying for duplicate
Mhm,
features. And so then you have to unpack that whole web of mess that you've created because you
right,
have all these different platforms, and okay, how do you move everything over here? So it's messy,
right.
I recognize.
Yes, and it doesn't need to be messy.
Yeah.
I, I think it's also so something that, what we see a lot, and when I'm talking, so the other thing about Auxilia is we offer one-to-one tailored coaching for clients, right?
Mhm.
So they have the opportunity to work with me. There are five of us on the coaching team. This was the differentiator that the founders of Auxilia were very passionate about offering, because a technology platform, irregardless of what it is simply a tool. It doesn't do the work, right? It supports the work that you're doing. And so what we focus on is everything around that tool to be able to use that tool effectively.
Mhm.
The and it's been great. because now people, I think that, they are more confident in using the tool, in using the platform. They understand that they don't have to have 6 different software subscriptions,
Right.
right, to do everything that they want to do and need to
Mm-hmm.
do on a daily basis. And they have the confidence to make an investment in a technology platform, and they don't get, kind of seduced by this idea that it's free, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
low cost. Because frankly, free is not always free. I mean,
It's
it's
not.
not. It's not. And you
Yes.
end up paying way more to, in both the short and the long term than
Mm-hmm.
you would by paying, a flat monthly fee to be able to accomplish everything that you want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this goes back to what we were talking about right at the top, where leaders seem so afraid to make wise, right, to make any kind of investment in
Mm-hmm.
technology because, they fear that they won't appear to be a good steward of someone's
Mm-hmm.
support.
Mm-hmm.
So, when they're like, oh, free, it's like, it's free, yay.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, we have to do that because we need to be a good steward
Right.
of the support that we have. I would argue you don't have to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on effective technology.
Mm-hmm.
Irregardless of the size of your organization, you probably shouldn't, right?
Right.
It's just not necessary and you shouldn't do that. Um, but you have to invest something because
Mm-hmm.
free, right? You have to have the confidence to say, for us to get to where we want to go, for us to be able to engage with our donors, with our stakeholders, with our
Mm-hmm.
constituents, to really serve them and support them, and to be the nonprofit that we want to be,
Mm-hmm.
we have to make this investment,
I want to go
right?
back to that a little bit because I want to echo
Mhm.
on that. And we're talking about this free, and the one that comes to my mind that I've seen more often, not if I can just, I'll be the one to call it out, is Salesforce, right? They give
Mhm.
free licenses out, or sometimes you can get them on TechSoup for like free, not necessarily Salesforce, but Salesforce gives licenses. Now, I am not a hater of Salesforce. I have Salesforce at my firm. I pay, I'm not a nonprofit, so I pay a lot of money for Salesforce, and I was very intentional about why I chose to go that route. A huge fan of the work that they do. However, I did not go into that relationship because it's low cost or free. In fact, I chose it because it is the greatest versatility, like most expensive could be, customizable platform that I know I won't outgrow. I went in
Mhm.
knowing I'm going to spend a fortune on this system. All right. And this is different
Mhm.
than the nonprofits that I've worked with that have jumped on the free bandwagon. And I will caution anybody, if you're choosing these free platforms strictly out of your budget cannot accommodate an investment, I I'm sure there's someone out there. However, I've met thousands of nonprofits, many, not all, of course, but much fewer, but still frequent enough that I feel like I can make this case. I don't know a single small to mid-sized nonprofit that received free licenses to this software that are actually using this platform effectively, because the cost to actually build it out and maintain it, you have to have something short of an IT degree to do it. And I know this because I have the software solution myself. I have a consulting firm on retainer. My business partner is basically an IT expert. I mean, he's a tech junkie. He's kind of taught himself how to develop it. I have a full-time IT guy that has experience in it. I've hired full-time staff people that know Salesforce. This is not a small undertaking. And I've
Right.
required any user to take exhaustive training on this platform. Okay. And we use it very successfully, but this is not a small undertaking. This is a full operational strategic decision that you have to make. So I caution people that before they spend, the time implementing or the staff capacity investing into trying to create it, or if you are an end user of this, it's like my boss made me use the software solution and I'm, completely lost on it. I'm validating you. It's a very complicated system. Okay. And
Yeah.
I've never seen a nonprofit actually use it in the way they thought they would. So I will say,
Yes.
when you're a small to middle market, I'm saying for the nonprofit space, I would argue less than 25 million, creating a full custom solution is probably not in your best advantage. If you insist upon it, you better budget at least somewhere in the ballpark of 100 grand or more to build that system out. It's a blank check. You got to have
I
some reserves.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, everyone
And I
got
love
some
you, Salesforce. Don't come for me, but I'm just saying.
I I
And there's not,
yes,
oh, by the way, I should say you can't really find the consultants because Salesforce doesn't actually do the build out. They sell the platform. And then you got to go find
right.
another consultant. So to
Right.
find a consultant that's trying to do the work at the discounted rate that the nonprofits are asking for, I'm sorry, nonprofits, they're not, these folks can go charge people like me murderous rates. They're not going to do the work. And so that is something I've
Yeah.
seen. It's like, Tasha, we even have a little bit of budget, but we can't find anybody to do the work for us. So
Well,
just fair warning for everyone.
oh yeah. I mean, so I've done two Salesforce transitions in my career. I've participated in them. The first one was probably easily $20,000.
Mhm.
The organization, and like you, I'm a fan of Salesforce. I've
Yeah,
used Salesforce in several organizations. It's great,
it's a powerhouse. Yeah.
very powerful, right? Fantastic. People see, these 10 free licenses,
Hmm.
and that's what they latch onto. And they don't think about, they're not planful, like you've said, they're not planful about what it will take to actually develop that system because it's just like, you know, like a little lump of clay. You have to
Hmm.
develop it.
Right.
It's just the licenses. I
Right.
mean, a reasonable for a smaller organization, in the Portland area where I'm based, a reasonable implementation is probably somewhere between 10 and
Yeah.
$20,000.
And that's very basic.
Right.
Like,
That's
say you're just
that.
using it for development, but a lot of
Right.
nonprofits, like, I'm going to use it for development. I'm going to use it for programs. I'm going to use it for all of these things to get that six figures. I
That's
feel like, I don't
oh,
know, maybe 50
that's
grand.
gonna
I don't
start.
know.
No, 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 no. That's gonna start probably at $100,000.
That's what I'm thinking,
Easy,
like 100 grand.
easy.
So,
Yeah,
um,
it's, and that goes back. I think that really speaks to the need to have to include technology in your strategic vision
mhm,
and be planful about how you are going to what technology you need in both the
mhm,
short term and the longer term,
right.
over maybe the next 3 years, and then be planful about how you are going to secure that technology to be able to support all of the other effort that you have going on within your organization, right?
Mhm,
You can't just wake up one day and say, okay, today we're gonna switch platforms,
mhm, mhm.
because
Right.
that is a recipe for disaster.
So, um, Paul, I want to hit on one more thing
Uh-huh.
before we wrap up the conversation today. I think one little piece of like advice that I think if I were sharing with the listeners that are like, okay, you all say things that make sense, like I know this is something I need to do. This isn't my skill set. Um, I know I need to get my board involved. So how do we move the needle when we have all of these things? Number one, it's not our skill set. Number two, we don't have a whole lot of money for it. Number three, we don't have a lot of time for investing. So I'm curious to hear your perspective, but my advice on kind of how to get the ball rolling. Number one is to get your board or committees involved in understanding like the importance of like why you need technology. If y'all are, need some starting points, the growing demand for programmatic outcome-based reporting. Okay, that's number one. Number two, like the growing trend of automation, integration, cost-effective savings, time, whatever. Three, just, a changing landscape in marketing, right? The days of like paper appeals or newsletters or whatever, there's so much more digital marketing that perhaps your organization too. I mean, the list is endless for what technology can be used for. And I'm here to say, I've served on boards where maybe that's not the skill set internally, but expressing to the board, this is part of the strategic plan, both in action and finances. You can create a task force with board members that are savvy in this. Maybe you have some tech focused board members that might want to serve on some sort of task force or something, or even staff members. Like I have staff members that they are actually assigned to certain platforms to research product developments and like what's advancing and sharing those advancements with other people on the team. And so you don't have to figure this out completely alone. But I think it is important to get more people involved because it's just not practical for one, person within the organization to be a master of technology. So kind of sharing that responsibility. Paul, what would you say to get your, board engaged in this, or at least starting this conversation if you don't really have that skill set
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. One, start early,
Yeah.
right? Don't just spring this on your board, right? Don't do that
Yeah. Yeah.
because that is the fastest way for them to put the brakes on it. So start early. I think that again, make it, if it hasn't been part of your annual planning or part of your strategic visioning, put it in there.
Hmm.
And 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 just say it's because we need to be able to report on impact more readily. We can be more efficient, which allows us to deliver more programming or do better development, right? There's plenty of justification on both sides of why you would want to you would make wise investments in technology. Um, find, find outside support. So there are lots of thought leaders. There are organizations like N10 who are really focused on advancing technology as a tool within the nonprofit space.
Hmm.
Like, find those people, follow them, take a webinar, something, ask your colleagues, right? There's
Hmm.
safety in numbers. What has someone else done to move the dial? Bring that back. Um, I think, developing a task force, don't develop a committee because no one wants to serve,
No committees.
no one wants to serve on a committee, but people will serve on a task force,
Hmm.
right? And be very clear in what the purpose of that task force is. I think what you say, involving the board in that, if you can
Hmm.
involve outside stakeholders who have experience in technology in that, fantastic. Because
Hmm.
then it's not just you having to make a guess at what you need. Um, and then I think, leaders just, they have to have the courage to say, this is what we are doing because this is what is good for the organization.
Hmm.
On the flip side of that, boards need to trust that their staff, right, the staff that they have hired, share a common vision for where an organization is going.
Mm.
And you have to empower the staff, right? Empower your staff to make decisions that propel the organization forward.
Mm.
Why boards insist on approving expenditures like $150 expenditure or a $200 a month expenditure, $300 a month, $3,600 a year. Why do you have to nitpick that? Now, if it's $10,000,
Sure.
$50,000, $100,000, absolutely. I've served on boards. I understand the fiduciary responsibility, but for
Hmm.
God's sake, trust your team. trust the team is making good decisions for the benefit of the organization, and let go of the need to control every single nickel that an organization might spend to propel it forward.
Yeah. We're looking at you, finance committee and treasurers. I'm a treasurer, and it's like, okay, if you all are good with these numbers, let me look at that. But Paul, this has been so insightful, and hopefully I don't know. Sometimes with these conversations, I'm like, if people are either going to be more overwhelmed or at least feeling a little bit more hopeful on how to get these things, or if nothing else, validated. I know I've certainly been in these situations, and kind of I'll leave with, if you're looking to implement something like this, think about working with a partner that's going to be working closely with you in the implementation. I have some horror stories of my own. I worked with a payroll company that, wanted to ship me, this was back when I was at a nonprofit, actual hand punching clocks, and expected me to not only install them, like bring my tool belt to work and install them on the wall, but like program them myself. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So if you, if you're looking for a partner, that's something I look for as a busy leader of a business myself. Partner with people that are actually truly going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. You're paying them a lot of money. Get them involved and make sure that they're helping you through that process, or at least leading you through that process, and just work with providers that are going to give you, that level of service needed. So I know that's high on my list of things when I consider new partners, especially ongoing partners. Paul, if people are interested in either connecting with you or learning more about this Auxilia, I can't even say the words. It's Friday. When we're recording this, if we want to find more about this kind of multi-step platform that could probably revolutionize some of the development departments for some of the organizations that might be listening, what's the best way to find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. I'm happy to talk with anyone about about Auxilia, about their development needs. If it's even just validation, we need that. This work is too hard. It is super grinding. Sometimes you just need some validation. It's like, yes, that is a crazy situation, and here's how you might be able to navigate it, right? Or, is there a way we can work together? For Auxilia, it's theauxilia.com. I would highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal, the coaching team, of course, is phenomenal. Amongst the five of us, we have probably over a century of experience in the nonprofit space. The customer service and implementation teams are awesome. They are really a partner on the journey with you. And the founders have all come out of the nonprofit space. So they share, right? They know the challenges. They have had those same horrors, right? They have had that same, same challenges, and they have been extraordinarily committed to creating a product that really it serves the nonprofit space as a partner, not as, it's not just, oh, we need to open a new revenue line, so let's sell into the nonprofit space.
Yeah.
This was built with the nonprofit space as right at the center of it. So yeah, theauxilia.com. Or myself on LinkedIn, happy to talk about Auxilia, about development, about red pandas, whatever you might need.
So that's helpful. And yeah, I'll do yet another shameless plug for checking out not just this platform, but other platforms. I know this was even, I think a year or two ago, I saw this platform, and it was just really cool to see that things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to track, like social media engagement through your fundraising platform. Wow, didn't even know technology was there yet or could do that. And so I really encourage anybody listening to, whether you're in the immediate market or not, do some of these demos, can keep your eyes and ears open for these new tech platforms that could really open your eyes to some advancements you didn't even know were happening. So
yeah.
Thanks again, Paul, for coming, and for
bet.
everyone that's listening. And another plug. You know what to do. Engage with this content in some way wherever you're listening or watching this content. I built this platform to be able to share cool and interesting ideas and ways to modernize, some of these smaller organizations. And the best way to do that is to engage with the content so other nonprofit leaders like yourself can find solutions like this. So if you found this meaningful at all, like, share, subscribe wherever you're at. I appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you all. Bye now. That's all we have for you today. Once again, I'm Tosha Anderson with the Charity CFO, and this is a Modern Nonprofit Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to a Modern Nonprofit Podcast on all major streaming platforms so you will stay notified for when the latest episode drops, which will help you stay in the know about anything nonprofit related. Also, join our community on Facebook by searching for a Modern Nonprofit Podcast and follow us on all of our social media accounts. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.